problematic, I would think, for our finance department to sit there and actually do this math all the time. It's contrary to standard budgeting, and I think it's an administrative burden to have to prepare these every time we want to hire someone. I mean, we're in operations, or, yes, I think we watch the money, and again, we get a budget report, we get status change reports with new hires, with wage changes. We get all of that already. So I'm not sure from a transparency standpoint, we get all this data already. So I'm not sure. I know it's a spend on anything, I guess. I don't think they can spend it on anything. I think there's rules with purchasing that has to be followed, and I think there's contractual obligations with adjusting wages that have to come to council. So I don't agree with that they can spend it on anything.
Councilman Randall.
To the chair, Jason, when that money is placed into these accounts to hire police officers and everything else, and that money is for hiring, once that money goes in there, that money can only be spent for that individual's hiring, each individual. But that money can't be spent for anything else, for an employee's hiring. That money can't be moved.
Through chair, the budget policy that we have is once an amount is allocated to a department, for budget purposes, they can do a budget transfer within their department. That budget transfer has to be approved by Budget and Finance and the Mayor's office. So for example, you have wages, you have professional services. You can transfer one out of that professional service into wages or vice versa through the form. We have a standard form that we use internally for that process. If I may make another comment to the chair, and I agree, transparency is huge. I agree with it. I just don't think this warrants, in the budget area, I think it warrants a change in process and procedures. That's a different topic in my opinion. Again, my main concern is if this motion is passed and lower, it shows that we have a $2.5 million positive amount, and then it may affect us in other areas, and I just don't want that to happen if it's not budget related, because if the goal is to put it back, then, then again, if it's just to be removed, that's fine. I mean, the removal of the budget item is fine. But if it's just, the goal is to remove it and put it back, to me, again, in all my experience, I've never seen that done. But again, my opinion, my experience, and that's the last comment I have on that, and I'll still answer any questions.
Sure, Chair.
Councilman Randall.
So in reference to placing money into that account for an individual to be hired, let's say one police officer, and that police officer is hired and he's paid that salary that he's supposed to get, okay? And then you say there's amendments that could be made within the department to move that money to something else?
If there is an excess, yes, we call that an interdepartment transfer.
So basically that money is not being used as we understand it, as myself. That means that money that is sitting there to be used on each individual police officer down the road, can that money be spent up if they start changing things and spending money within that realm? So that money, like you said, each individual police officer you hire, and you said there could be budget amendments inside the department, and they use that money off of a budget amendment that is sitting here for the next police officer to be hired. Any of them. Would that affect that hiring of any additional police officers without moving additional money?
From a budget point of view, I don't think that should affect it, but I mean, that's hiring. I don't.
So why would there be a budget amendment to use that money?
Through chair, just saying that that's what the policy is. For example, overtime. Sometimes when positions don't get filled, vacancies, there might be some more overtime. The department has the latitude, again, this is the policy, right or wrong, the latitude to say, you know what, I'm going to reduce my wages by $100,000 and increase my overtime by $100,000 because the total department expense is not changing.
I'm sorry, but I disagree. Those come back before the council, they always have, in particular for police and fire. We have a budget amount of overtime, we have the personnel, and I think pretty much
overtime and wages to zero, and then it wouldn't come for council for approval, but in most cases, it's either an increase or reduction to that department, which has to be approved by council. And again, that's the policy that's been in place for a long period of time, is that we use the department as the indicator, so.
Yeah, and I,
Councilman
through the
Rare.
chair, and the reason I'm saying it, can that, so by moving that money, if you had to, let's say you weren't getting good hiring, and all of a sudden that money's sitting there, so you're still saying that that money could actually be used with an interdepartmental transfer of any of that money to be used somewhere else?
Within the department, that is the policy.
So, you see what I'm saying? We're actually taking monies we're expecting to hire people with and using it somewhere else. Now, what, you know what I'm saying? Is that money, can it be used for any additional, taking money out of that particular bowl, just for hiring? And then you said that the interdepartment, if they need money within that department, can they reach into this bowl and transfer money out of that bowl for hiring to somewhere else?
Within the department, that is the policy.
So, you see what I'm saying? So that bowl, now, what happens if that bowl gets down less? How do you get money to refill the bowl?
Well, that's where you have to do the amendment. But also keep in mind, it's a good point, but keep in mind that if it's not a payroll item, it still has to go through approval of council if it's over $2,000. So typically, a lot of those interdepartment transfers that you do see is related to an item that's approved by council.
So that would come to us as an amendment within that department.
If there is a $2,000 item in a line item, for it, if it increases the total department's budget, it has to be approved. Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Brandon.
So oftentimes we get things before us that says, oh, but it's budgeted, it's in the budget, there's money in the budget for that. So these vacancies put $2,500,000 in these departments. I would like to have a tighter control of that. I brought with me today all these budgets for all of these years, and none of them have vacancies in them. And I can show them. And so how is it that we're doing it now in the last 8 years? Why?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Reserve.
Yeah, I don't know that it's really an opinion matter or a personal debate. We're citing the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act of 1968, which states how you should try and project your actual intended expenses. So it's not really a debate, it's something passed by the Michigan legislature, and it's a commonly accepted practice of budgeting. I don't know that there's a personal opinion that says, on behalf of the city of Taylor, in my opinion, we should violate the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. That's not an opinion that I think we shouldn't take lightly.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Councilman
So
Brandon.
you mean to tell me that we need to, what if this number was 7 million? Can you budget 7 million? You're going to tell me that there's a book out there is telling me that I have to budget $7 million to be unencumbered because of a standard out there? I don't think so. I'd like to see that
To hire
standard.
$7 million worth of personnel or have a $7 million expenditure, yes.
I wholeheartedly, I think transparency on its face is inconvenient, for sure. And I think that it needs to be, I think that the vacancies need to come out, and that there is enough money in every department for a whole year's worth of the employees that are there. So you can't say you can't hire, because the money is already there, and you can pay them. But in the mayor's department, there was not money for that person allocated in his budget, and it was paid. I don't understand how that can happen. And I'm just told that's how it is. And, so I just think that this is a catch-all. I think this is a catch-all for a place where budget transactions can happen within the department because the money is already there.